This is the latest installment of the podcast series, Intergenerational Conversations about Climate Crises. We're here in Oromocto High School doing a number of discussions, and what we're doing is talking about our concerns about climate. Of course, we hear about climate changes and crises and catastrophes every day on the news, but we don't hear so much about hopefulness for climate adaptation. And so those are some of the things we want to look at both angles here. That being said, we're going to start, and what I'll do is I'll ask the first question of the retired individual, and then that same question goes to the high school student, and then after they both answered either simply or in vast detail, discuss their answers to see how they jibe with one another or don't. So let's proceed.
Hi, I'm Isabella Kerr, and I go by Bella. I'm in a military family, so my dad, he's been in the military, and I've been in Oromocto for about 12, going on 13 years. My hobbies are reading, writing, running, and I really enjoy hanging out with my mom. I really like learning about climate change and learning how we can help the environment grow and live for much longer, and I enjoy learning new things every day.
Great.
My name is Paul, and I'm, believe it or not, it's hard for me to believe, a senior citizen. Chronologically, I would fit very much into that category, which means I've been around for a while, not as long as a fossil, but starting to feel like one at times. I guess one of the things that I would bring to the table is the fact that I've lived in different parts of Canada. I'm just wondering, Bella, if you've been in your dad's in the armed forces, maybe you've lived in different parts of Canada as well.
Yeah, I was born in Manitoba. And then he's been all over the place. Yeah, he's been in Ontario, he's been in Manitoba. He's only really come here very recently, but mostly I've been in New Brunswick, but yeah.
Okay. Well, I left New Brunswick for 10 years and
really?
lived in the most exciting place, I suppose. I lived in the Northwest Territories in Inuvik, 120 miles north of the Arctic Circle.
Oh, wow.
And I know a little bit about permafrost and the effects that climate change is having on permafrost. I say when I know it, I know very little bit about it, but I've lived there and I've seen it and I have some understanding of it, I guess. I'm a citizen of Canada, proud Canadian, and a proud New Brunswicker, and realize that the times there are changing and requiring some adjustments to the way we live on this planet Earth.
Definitely.
Very good. My name is Bruce Langus. I'll be the moderator of the session. Let's look at our first question. I'll give it to Paul. Whose climate information do you trust?
Well, I guess I'd say in answering that, Bruce, that I trust a lot of different sources, and I don't trust anybody completely, but certainly the Government of Canada would be a source. The United Nations would be another. And I come across one recently called Investopedia, which from a numbers financial point of view seem to have some valid information.
Very good. Bella, the same question to you.
Okay. I definitely do agree with Paul's statement. I also think that scientists are definitely people who I trust, as well as the Government of Canada. And many people who have a lot of information and a lot of knowledge about climate change and the environment are people who I trust a lot.
Very good. And you are taking a class right now in environmental science here at OHS. Very good. You both mentioned Government of Canada and scientists. The next question is, do you trust Canadian government climate scientists? Just talking about scientists who are employed by the government.
I do, definitely, because I think that there's, like I said before, there's a lot of knowledge within these people, and also that they do know what they're doing. So I think that trusting them is very important, and having a lot of faith in them is what kind of keeps us going. especially since my people my age, I think that as long as people still have faith in the environment and faith in the government of Canada, there might be more people who want to expand their knowledge and continue to bring more knowledge to the table within the government of Canada and scientists in the government of Canada.
Mm-hmm. Paul?
Yes, I am inclined to agree with Bella as well. I think we have fewer governmental scientists today. A recent government reduced the number and the amount of money that was put into scientific discovery, which I think is not a good thing. I think we need as much as we can. At the same time, it seems that on whatever side of whatever scientific topic comes up, you can almost buy a scientist that will speak to your point of view. So it sometimes, where I would say, yes, I believe in the government scientists. I think we have to question at least whatever information is being presented and be a bit skeptical. I don't think it hurts to be skeptical about any scientist information.
Do you agree with that, Bella?
Definitely. I do think that having some bias is important, and having a little bit of being a bit skeptical is important as well. I do definitely agree with that, because sometimes you put so much faith in one thing, there are other options, or there's sometimes another side of the story as well.
Yeah, I think just speaking from my perspective, that skepticism is certainly a big part of science. When you see something new presented by one of your colleagues, the first thing that you do is that you say is, can I repeat that data gathering? And if I can, and the data turns out to be the same as my colleague, then I have a lot more faith in the conclusions in the hypothesis. But if I am not able to repeat the data gathering, then I have to be skeptical. So that's part of the business. On the same path, Paul, do you trust our political leaders to protect Canadians from future climate crises?
I guess I have a hard time, Bruce, responding to, do I trust our political leaders to protect Canadians? This is a big issue. It's right up there with overpopulation of the globe, helping third world countries or developing countries develop. Canada is now ranked 10th in the world, is the information that I got recently, as a contributor to greenhouse gases. So, I mean, our influence is not as great, say, as the number one emitter, number one and number two between the United States and China. They're vastly higher contributors to greenhouse gases than Canada is. Part of the question for me, I guess, Bruce, maybe I could sum it up by saying, how do we green or live in a green way on this lovely little blue planet and still make a living, but not destroy the globe as we make a living? It's a challenge, and I see that as being the overall challenge for the Canadian government to help us. We've got some resources in Alberta, carbon resources, and the economy in Alberta does well when they're able to get those products to market. At the same time, they're creating quite an interesting big hole in the province of Alberta as they extract this tar sands product. So it's do I trust them? I think for the most part they're trying to do the best to find a balance between green in the ground and green in your hand, a form of money. We have to have a livelihood, but I think we have to work on, I think if I was in the Canadian government, I would be trying to slowly change people's attitudes and opinions towards this question. This has got to become more and more important. And time is passing very quickly, of course. And, there's not a lot of time to do that. So I think for a politician, they've got to look out for the best interests of Canada, and then they've got to look out for how do they stay in office to make these best decisions. So it's a challenge there.
Thank you. Bella, do you trust political leaders to protect Canadians?
Like Paul said, I agree with almost everything Paul said. Everything, actually. Definitely, I think that having faith and believing in political leaders of Canada to protect us is very important. But I also think we should believe in ourselves and be able to have faith in ourselves, because the government is looking out for Canada, and sometimes I think without realizing it, they can push aside the protection of the environment. So I think that one big thing that maybe could happen is also kind of starting small in communities or in provinces. So let's say in Oromocto, we could start planting more. We can start saying, instead of people use transportation by, let's say, cars, they can start to bike, or we can have one bus for the community. And also, I think that if we start small in certain provinces, or if we start small in communities, maybe the government will catch on. Maybe they can kind of start to see what's happening in Canada, and they can start making a change with this. So definitely promoting safety within the environment, and also letting people know that this is the only world we have. We don't have another one. So I think that taking care of it to the best of our ability is definitely the best option we can do. And letting other generations in the future know that our environment and our world is very, very important to us, and that we should treat it with care and kindness.
Excellent, excellent. You kind of jumped me here. My next question was going to be, where do the politics start with protecting Canadians? Does it start in Ottawa? Does it start in Fredericton? Or does it start here in Oromocto?
I think that it can start anywhere anybody puts their mind to. I think that if we start little by little in each province or in each city, I think that even if you start with one person, if you start with a group of people, that can make a huge change, not only in Canada, but in the world. Because if in Canada, if this gets on the news, or if this happens to be on the global news, maybe other countries or other places in the world can see that this needs to change, and that if we all continue as a population to make a change, this will definitely help make a difference in the long run. And I just think that it doesn't matter where you start, as long as you start. I think that's the major thing. And anybody of any age or any ethnicity or anything like that, you can do it as long as you put your mind to it.
Great. Paul, where does the political action start? Does it start at your front door, or does it start in Ottawa?
Well, I like what Bella's, the point of view she's having. When she said start small, just for clarification, Bella, I think you're suggesting that individuals can start small,
Definitely.
Plant a garden, plant a tree in their own backyard. And that just seems to be so responsible and needs to be encouraged. Yes, I think it starts right outside it starts on the inside of my door, even on how I heat my house and how energy efficient my own house is. And I was just thinking, as I came up this morning from Gagetown, I was thinking, I'm going to drive 100 kilometers an hour because you burn less fuel, and the price of gas has gone up today again, and I can't do anything about that. So I guess, I'm not sure that the Canadian government can do a whole lot about that either, really, given the worldwide interrelatedness of oil supplies are in the world. So if we all slowed down a little bit, and there was a mandate for that a number of years ago throughout the United States. I think the speed limit was reduced to 55 on their highways, which was more like 60 or like 100, maybe 95 kilometers in Canada. And I know myself that my fuel consumption goes down if I reduce my speed. And so to save money for me, I reduce my speed is just one of the things that I think we all could be encouraged to do. And just having a realization that there's no other world here. This is it. Let's take better care of it.
Mm-hmm. Next question for Bella. Have you ever written to your MLA or your Member of Parliament urging climate action?
I have not, but I definitely plan to. I know my mom has before in the past, and I like to follow in her footsteps, definitely, because I think that once somebody in that position, when they become aware of what's happening and what people think about this issue, definitely something will happen, because sometimes stuff doesn't change because people don't know about it, or sometimes people don't know how to start to make a change. So I think that if people around the world, and especially in Canada, definitely start to write to the members of parliament or anybody like that, urging climate action, I think that definitely, like, they could see that everybody or a large amount of people need this to change, and that their opinion on this that needs to change is very important. And I think that especially people of any age, like I know that people my age are definitely seeing the dangers of climate change a lot. And I know that I've seen it all over the internet and in our own community. And I think that writing to somebody like that can definitely prove that this is urgent and this needs to change very quickly.
Paul?
No, I've never written.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any reason?
I really, Bruce, I'd have to say that there's so much time and I have so much energy, and there have been higher priorities that may change in the future. But in the meantime, I'll take action in my own little corner of the world and keep composting and try and turn thermostat down and install a heat pump, that sort of thing.
Exactly. Okay. Staying with the politics here for a little bit longer. Who has more to lose from climate disasters? Students or senior citizens?
Well, I think we both have something to learn, but the fact that the students are going to be around longer than we are, they probably have more to lose. Because we've been ignorant of the whole situation during the most of my life, and it's just been in the past 10 or 15 years really that it's come on my radar at all. Prior to that, it was big, better, more, boom, and try to prevent world war. In when I was a student, it was protesting against war. That was the big issue of the day. It's interesting how it's changed from anti-war to recognizing that we need to do more to protect the earth in the way that we contribute to it. Another issue that I am interested in and is just the natural cycle of the evolution of the earth, the ongoing changes. When you think that at several billion years ago, this was the supercontinent of Pangaea. And as the globe cooled and expanded, we have now 7 continents, whereas a billion years ago, we just had 2 or 3 continents. So this has changed. And I was talking to somebody from Arkansas yesterday, and they were telling me about how in the mountains around their home, there's all kinds of seashells, which indicated that it was a seabed at one point. When you start to see the significant, the dramatic changes that have taken place over the whole evolution of this earth, I guess I just have a question about what role that continuing in evolution has to play in this warming of the globe that we're presently experiencing.
Who has more to lose? Teenagers or senior citizens?
I do agree that everybody around the globe does have something to lose, but I know that people my age or my generation definitely, like, we're going to be the next parents and we're going to be the next grandparents. And I think that right now, people my age are definitely seeing that it's a big issue, because even around here, we're already seeing things that have changed. I mean, 11 years ago, I was in kindergarten, and I think that then this neighborhood looks a lot different than it did when I was in kindergarten. So I think that 11 years ago, that's not a whole lot of time, but that's already a huge difference between then and now. And I think that in 11 years in the future, that's already going to be a bigger issue. So I think that my generation definitely has some things to lose, but also some things to gain. If we start planning on making a difference, if we start planning on definitely starting to, like, planting, or starting to turn on the thermostat, or starting to use the water less, turn off lights, little things like that may actually make it easier in the future. It may not be as big as climate change or global warming might not be huge problem if we start to do little things like that now. And definitely I think that my generation, because there's a lot of people interested in this, there's going to be more scientists, I'm pretty sure. And I think there's going to be more people willing to put their efforts into learning and trying to expand their knowledge and trying to actually help the environment. So I think that in the future, I have more hope than I have now, but I think the future can be bright. I do. Yeah.
Do you agree with that, Paul?
I love it. I love it. Yes, yes. Hope over despair is always a good thing. And Bella, as long as we have a group of young people like Bella with us, I think we're in good hands. Yeah, because she can see the opportunities here. And I think that's part of the secret for us old dogs as well, to recognize that there is a future in developing solar panels and windmills and all that sort of thing that produce green electricity. You know, it's I guess we have the only nuclear plant in Atlantic Canada here in New Brunswick. And sometimes the nuclear option is considered a green solution as well. But I think it's got some associated issues, you know, the disposal of the waste material, the spent fuel, that makes it a challenge on a different front. So the answers to these questions are not simple, but, you know, I think I agree with Bella that with more research and more scientists looking into it and taking an interest, you know, I mean, there's a possibility of a third world war breaking out anytime soon, and yet it hasn't trumped climate change at this point. It's climbing, though. It is. So there's different things that we have to be concerned about, but let's not lose sight. It would be terrible. I mean, the economy is another thing that is under change right now with increasing interest rates, but let's not lose sight of the need to press on with the issues associated with reducing greenhouse gases.
Next question, which is really part of the same chain of questions here. Bella, are you and your friends concerned about coming climate crises?
I know I am 100% because I am a 16-year-old, so I know I'm still quite young. But I know that for my whole life, I've definitely been very interested in this topic. I've always been doing my research on that, and I've done a bunch of projects in the past about this. And my friends, they don't have the same mindset as me. It's not that they're not interested. I just think sometimes with everything that's going on in their lives and sometimes in the world, they don't really think about it the same. But I think that a lot of people my age can kind of be distracted with other things. I think that sometimes they can be distracted with if they're going to be dating soon or if their partner's going to break up with them soon. I'm not sure, but I know that definitely, like, I'm very, very intrigued with this topic, and I think that the more people my age know about it, the more people I think will become more intrigued with this, because once you know, it's kind of hard to forget, because sometimes you can kind of live in ignorance, and I think that that's a lot of the time what happens with people, because sometimes you can see on the news in third world countries, you can see that they don't have enough resources, and you think that's too bad, but then you just move on with your life. And sometimes it's the same thing with the environment. You can see forest fires, you can see the environment basically rotting, and then people realize this is way too bad, we have to do something, but sometimes they don't have enough strength or they don't have enough people on their side to help, so we forget. So definitely I think that my generation does that a lot, and once you kind of have it in your face on the news, or if you have it in your face reading a book, I think that you won't forget. And I think the more people my age learn and adapt to wanting to learn this, I think that we can definitely make a change, people my age, because it's important to me, and I think it's important to a lot of people to want to fix this issue right now.
Good. Paul, are you and your friends, or you and your family, concerned about coming climate crises?
I'm just thinking of times when I've gotten together with either my family or my friends recently, and I can't say that it's been a hot button topic. But yes, I think they are concerned. I'm part of the baby boomers wave, and our issues tend to dominate the political agenda oftentimes. So things like pension and healthcare and things like that tend to, but it's as Bella's just said, we're not so concerned about our peers anymore or dating as much. There's a bit of that, but not so much. But there are other issues that seem to be just as, people losing their driver's license because their capabilities are being diminished, and it means significant change. I mean, that's one way to reduce greenhouse gases if you get fewer people driving automobiles and sharing cars and things like that. Probably, Bruce, I'd probably say probably not as much as we should be. Certainly not as much as we could be. They're just, in the midst of whatever project you're working on, life goes on. And somebody backs out of the garage and bends the door on the car and things like that.
Mm-hmm. The fact that you and your family, and that's a pretty common comment from a lot of people, is that the family does not discuss climate change at all. I'm wondering if this is because it gets mixed up with partisan politics. It's one of those taboo subjects like sex that you never discuss at Thanksgiving dinner. And so I'm wondering maybe climate change is associated with partisan politics.
I think that's spot on, actually, because I think that, like you said, topics like that, I think sometimes climate change or global warming can actually cause fear. And sometimes when you're scared of something, you don't want to think about it. And sometimes you don't want to realize that something's happening. So sometimes I think within families, either parents or kids feel like it's something to be ashamed of learning or ashamed of thinking that somebody might have done this or somebody might have participated in doing this. But I think that not being ashamed of learning about climate change and not being ashamed of talking about it, because it's something that has already happened. So I think that once you realize this is a normal thing, it's going to continue being normal. I think that talking about it within households or within different places like that, I think that that's just something that needs to become normal, because once that happens, I think that parents can realize that kids want to learn. Kids want to be able to know how they can help and how they can help the world, especially people. Because I know I actually babysit, and the kids I babysit for, they love doing their own home gardens, and they love going on walks. They like baking places. They like doing stuff like that. So I think that they're like 2 and they're 6. So I think that once they already have that drive, they already have the energy to want to do that, that shows a whole lot. So I think that not letting kids stay in the dark about climate change is definitely important.
If I could just add, it's so encouraging to be able to hear that there's a class here at OHS that offers environmental studies, and I would maybe suggest that the class might take on a project like developing a trivia game on climate change and the whole issue that could be used by families at Thanksgiving dinners and everything, where you would just have different cards. And again, I think we have to be careful about looking for the absolute correct answer, but just something to get people thinking, like knowing, for instance, that Canada's number 10 in the emissions list, and what are the top 5. And the other, if I might just add at this point, I'm not sure where you're going to ask, where I might answer this or use this as an answer. Otherwise, Bruce, in 2020, the top 5 were China, the United States, India, Russia, and Japan. But when you look from 1750 to 2020, over 100 years, through the 1800s and 1900s, the order has changed. So from 1750 to 2020, the list read United States, China, Russia, Germany, and the United Kingdom. Now, when you think that the Industrial Revolution started in Europe, especially in Great Britain and Germany as well, that's when they would have been high emitters, but now they're not even in the top 5 anymore. So their position has changed, and I think we can learn some things from this as well, as they have fallen in their production of materials in the world, manufacturing, and I think the biggest contributor, certainly in China and to a smaller extent in the United States, but in India and Russia, is the burning of coal. It's a very inexpensive product. It's got a lot of carbon in it that's emitted when it's burnt. And if we could identify what the hot button topics are in each country, and these are things that would be in your trivia game, Bella. What is the main source of carbon pollution in China, for instance? It would be from manufacturing. In the United States, it has more to do with transportation, moving goods across the continent back and forth, and airplanes and all that sort of thing.
Good point. Good point. We'll follow up on our political angle here. Bella, how would you feel about Canada giving the vote to 16-year-olds?
Definitely, I think I'd say no, just because there is a reason why minors can't vote. You can't drink. 16-year-olds can drive, which is a big responsibility, which sometimes I think that I'm kind of weary of, because I'm already starting to drive. I think I'm pretty responsible, but I've seen some of my classmates drive, and I can't say the same thing. But I definitely think that giving the right for 16-year-olds to, I don't think that would be the best option, just because I think adults definitely have a different mindset, because there's a maturity level. As a 16-year-old, you don't really think of the future options. You don't really think of what can happen in another year. You kind of think what can happen in the present more than the future. So I think that keeping the vote to an adult age is definitely important, because not because 16-year-olds aren't important, but more because their vote can kind of be swayed by their classmates, or it can be swayed by other people. So sometimes the maturity level isn't always there, and sometimes they can be really influenced. I know that sometimes I can be influenced by other people, and I think that making a decision right now at my age, I don't think that'd be the smartest option. And I just think that keeping it, like I said, to an adult age would be the best option, I guess. Yeah.
Paul, what are your thoughts?
I agree with Bella completely.
So, to sum up, you think that 16-year-olds aren't mature enough?
Yes, I thought you've presented it in an interesting way, Bruce, by saying they've got the most at stake, and there's no getting around that. Bella's going to be here much, from today on, Bella's going to be here much longer than I am. And so, the outcome is more important to her, especially when we see this getting worse and worse and worse. The answers, Bruce, are not easily achieved. And I think when Bella mentions maturity and some wisdom here, not to say that because I've lived as long as I have that I'm all wise and all knowing, but I guess I'm just more aware of the various options and possibly the ways of achieving success. If I could be persuaded, and then it's not even persuaded, but motivated, maybe encouraged to apply myself to this, and not just me, but all seniors. This whole business of discussing it at Thanksgiving and Christmas and anytime the family gets together, I think that should become more common. It should be one of the things that we have to discuss that is an ongoing concern. It's happening out there.
Mm-hmm. Well, good. So you're in very close agreement, it sounds like. The only thing I would add is that I know a lot of 70-year-olds, and a lot of them aren't very mature. So just keep that in mind. All right. To close out the political point of view here, why aren't students out in the streets every day demanding action? Paul?
I'm not a student anymore. Bruce, I don't know. As I pulled up this morning, there's two groups across the street, and my understanding there's no longer smoking allowed on the school property, Bella, and so they go across the street to smoke. Their whole mindset is just so different at this particular time in their life. So we'll wait.
Yes, I agree wholeheartedly with that, especially since I think that until something affects somebody or themselves, a lot of times they won't want to talk about it, or they won't really want to make a difference. So I think that, especially with people, that certain group over there it's called the slab. People over there, they definitely would not want to do that because it wouldn't affect them, or it might be able to I know that a lot of people, there was a protest a couple years ago here, and there was a whole riot, and it was because their place over there was affected. So I think that sometimes you can't make everybody happy, but I think that because people don't demand action, because people don't want to make a difference, it's because it doesn't affect them. And I think until they realize that it in fact does affect them, they won't want to make a difference. Because there was a Black Lives Matter movement, which is very, very important, and that was very cool. And there was only 50 people who did that, and the 50 people were people of color. So, and there's about 1,000 and change people here. So that movement there proved to the town that definitely until it affects people in a certain area, you won't get the same amount of people as you would in the city. So I think that until people actually realize that people my age are the ones really, really affected, and that they realize that they need to protest or they need to make a difference, they won't. So I think that as a school or as a town, definitely opening people's eyes as teenagers, because as a teenager, your world's pretty small. So I think that I've been taught by my parents that there's a lot more than just online problems or friend problems. So I've always been willing to listen to climate change and want to learn about global warming. And I think that making it more hands-on maybe might actually start a difference, because knowing that as a school we have a garden out front and a lot of people enjoy that. So I think if we start to continue gardens around the school, and if people can realize this is going to help the environment, maybe they can start to make action or demand action. That was kind of like I went all over the place with that, but I guess my point is just making sure that people understand and making sure that people realize that the world isn't as small as they think, I think.
Good. Thoughts, Paul? You disagree with all of that?
No, not at all. I agree. I think I'm pleased to be here with Bella that can give such astute answers, and I'll just listen.
Very good. Very good. Last question for us today. Paul, what are some things you can do today to fight climate change?
Well, I've covered some of those already, Bruce, when I talked about turning the thermostat down, ensuring that the envelope of our house, the outside, the doors, windows, and roofs, and all that sort of thing, I have lots of insulation, that we have an efficient home, that we drive an automobile that is relatively green, as green, as it can be. But even in that, like I'm just thinking that I was on a plan that within, say, 3 or 4 years to get at least a hybrid, if not an electric automobile. And then the transmission went in the car that I was driving, and I had to turn that in and get a new car. So now I've got to reset my time frame. So while it was my plan to be hybrid electric within 3 to 4 years, now it's going to be 6 or 7 years. But so make sure your living accommodation are as efficient as possible. The transportation modes you're using are as efficient, and to that, there's sort of a where we live in Gagetown, there's the issue that we often need things in town or in the city, and so to plan your trips so that you're not running back and forth all the time. If you can try to do it once a week, that's ideal. Well, and even less than once a week, once every 2 weeks would be even better. So less frequently, and where we live in the country, it wouldn't be unusual for me to drive 40,000 kilometers in a year just to get to all the various things that I have participated in, and my wife as well. So it's to be as economical with the automobile as possible. And as I mentioned already, driving 100 kilometers an hour instead of 120 kilometers an hour even, and investing in a heat pump, those sorts of things, I think, are things that we can all start on right away.
Definitely, I do agree with all of that. Especially since my major thing that we do a lot of the time is that we try to only go to the store once a week, and then we only try to go to town every couple of weeks. So my family, we're all really big bikers, and we really like to use different types of transportation. But I think that we're only down to one car, so we typically carpool. But definitely my dad, he really likes to bike, and I enjoy that too. I'm a runner, so I normally walk to school and I walk from school. Most of the time as well, we turn off lights and we turn off the water when we brush our teeth or wash our hands, do the dishes. And sometimes I actually like to turn off my phone, because when I'm not using it, sometimes I think that the energy, one, it actually can drain your phone battery, and two, if you're not using it, you should just power it off, because I personally don't need it on all the time. I'm not one to carry my phone with me 24/7, but I know a lot of the time I quite enjoy spending quality time with people. So I normally keep the TV off. I don't really use the phone a whole lot. I quite enjoy spending time outside, so we do that. We do a lot of gardening as well. I think that especially in the future, the major thing is definitely going to cities. So in the future, I plan on being a journalist, and I mean, I think it'd be really cool to go to Toronto, but now that I think about it, there are a lot of local places that I can go to university and places like that, because big cities, that's where the energy is mostly used. So I think that when big cities use so much energy, it's almost hard to kind of focus on using less. So I have family in Toronto actually, and they live in the countryside. So they say that they've noticed that there's a whole lot of overpopulation there, which is known, but also that realizing that there's other places in Canada you can go to. We don't spend a whole lot of time inside in the winter and fall. So I think that sometimes people realize that nature is very important, and that maybe they'll actually realize that using less energy and using less time inside and the lights on might actually help little by little. So I think that sometimes little changes like that, just turning off your water, using energy less, definitely using your own resources that you can find, I think that's just a major thing. It's small, but it helps in the long run.
Great. I'll just add one thing. Remember that composting is the most important thing you can do as a homeowner. It's even more important than adding solar panels to your roof. So take that away too. I want to thank both of you for excellent answers and excellent repartee. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Many thanks.